Hello everyone, Anita here and welcome to the 52-week illustration challenge. It is week 14 and oh my god, week 14 guys, we've done so many already. I cannot believe that I've done 14 pieces in a row. And if anyone is to thank for that, it's definitely you guys, because if not these videos, I would definitely already just quit. Let's be honest here for a second. So continuing from the last week, I've decided to incorporate my own wants and needs into the painting, and so I wanted to paint giant mushrooms. And this week's theme is, or rather was, camping. So as you can see, we have giant mushrooms and some camping tents. Well, one tent, but that's enough, I suppose. One tent is better than none. So I've started with a blue pencil sketch, which I then enhanced a little bit with just a fine liner. And this is a new kind of like experimental technique I'm using in my own paintings, because you see, I really dislike how strong and strict, I suppose you can say that, the fine liner sketch looks like. But then the pencil sketch, the blue pencil sketch, looks a little bit too bland. I end up enhancing it. We can call it like that, with a fine liner in the end anyway. And so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna do it from the beginning, and then at least I will see what's going on in the painting, and it's gonna look a little bit better. And I'm going for a really minimalistic background here. Initially I wanted to make the whole background blue, but I started painting those little like shapes, kind of like something like clouds, just blue. And I really liked it, so I just left it like that and then painted the water under the mushrooms in a kind of similar way, just cutting off at the edges. And then I'm painting in some shapes for the bushes and the trees. As you can see, some of the trees are covered with masking fluid, and I'm giving the chance to the masking fluid from last painting, the minty, refreshing smelling masking fluid that ruined my painting. But this time I've used a lot less, and I've let the masking fluid dry for a very long time. I didn't touch the heat gun for the painting almost at all. And so I was really hoping that it would work better. I'm kind of building up the different layers of blue, trying to get the kind of like shades in the water. I knew I would probably paint white circles, like shiny circles on the water, and so I wanted to build up the color under the mushrooms so that those circles would be visible. And then I'm coming in with some green, because I painted some of the circles, which are supposed to be bushes, in blue, and then covered it with green. It immediately changed the hue of the green to a little bit of a darker shade. Shade. The shade of green became darker, and so it immediately gave me that perspective look that I really like to achieve in my paintings. Also made it a little bit more interesting. I wasn't really going for perspective here. I wasn't really kind of working in the depth, only with the trees a little bit, but the whole painting is rather flat. And I'm adding also, I'm kind of experimenting through the whole painting. As you can see, I've added a little bit of green, and I wanted to add a little bit of blue to the reed stalks. Are these stalks? Just the reeds. But I changed my mind just last second and decided to kind of cover the whole area in green and like feather it out so that it wasn't too stark, and just gave that little hint of green in that area. I really like to do that in all of my paintings. If I ever paint reeds, you will see that I use that technique where I will add like a background, like as if the reeds were almost glowing with green. That's the idea I usually have when I look at the surrounding. When I look at the trees that don't have any leaves yet, but it's like at the moment we have the beginning of spring, everything is starting to get green. And if you look at the brown, bare trees, you can see this faint glow of green. And that's the same something that I wanted to achieve in this painting, because the bushes usually get green much faster than the trees. And so I made sure that to incorporate that. So we have a lot of green bushes, but as you can see, the trees are still very bare. Here you can see better that effect I'm trying to achieve, where I'm just building up green very gently. I don't want to overpower it. It's supposed to be just like a gentle glow of green over the reeds, and then I will come back in later and add a little bit of detail. I'm doing the exact same thing with the bushes in front, and I'm also adding a little bit of shading to the shapes. I want to go for a very simple look. Something I've been seeing in illustration a lot recently has been like, I've been checking Pinterest a lot and other painters, and that kind of caught my attention, that those simple shapes, and I wanted to do that too. I always do a little kind of like, I don't have a style when it comes to drawing green scenery, like greenery. Green scenery, greenery. And I wanted to experiment a little bit more with different shapes and different techniques, and kind of set on something, so that it's easier for me later on to come back to that style. I don't have to use it all the time, of course. I can use all kinds of different styles, but I wanted to try something different. This was basically it. I wanted to try something different, and I really enjoyed painting this. I've mentioned before that I'm struggling with the 52 weeks challenge, and of course it's already week 14 and there is still so much in front of us, and you know, the perspective that I have to do so many paintings. I have to, because now I already started, so I have to. I have the kind of personality which works really badly with something I have to do. It doesn't apply to work, it just applies to more personal projects. If I have to do something, I will basically procrastinate and just do anything I can, so just not to do it. So this is a very big fight for me, just finishing a painting every single week, especially with all the things that are happening around me. So it's a struggle. And actually doing the kind of paintings where I'm not really pushing myself to challenge myself towards the theme, or rather I'm bending the theme towards me. It's really a breath of fresh air for me, and I really enjoy it. So here, as you can see, I'm putting in some reds, and I've mixed a few reds from my palettes, reds, oranges, because I really didn't want it to be just one flat, the same red that I use in other paintings. I wanted to, one of the mushrooms, I wanted it to be a little bit darker, one of them to be a bit lighter. Still flat, of course, I love flat colors, but just different shades. And so, and I'm working with the same colors here, so I use Prussian blue for the background. It's a really beautiful flat blue. It's absolutely gorgeous. Still ultramarine is my favorite one, but as you know, it can be grainy. So using Prussian blue, I just know it will become flat. And it's also amazing for mixing. I absolutely love Prussian blue for mixing. Ultramarine blue is a bit of a kind of a color when it comes to mixing. You never know what you'll achieve, especially that it's a heavy color, so it usually just drops to the bottom and the colors separate. But the Prussian blue just mixes beautifully. So every single color in this painting, except of red, of course, not that there's much more, but I basically mix in with the Prussian blue because I absolutely love how it mixes. And as you can see, I'm kind of adding little veins to the wow, just branches to the bushes, adding a little bit of the green to the mushrooms, just kind of building up the idea that this is the ground. The mushrooms are the ground in this world. There's just water and the mushrooms. And now I'm taking off the masking fluid, and as you can see, I'm using just a razor. It's this very, very heavy-duty razor that I got especially for my colored pencils. I don't use it for colored pencils, but it works really well for taking off masking fluid, because this masking fluid unfortunately does not want to just lift when I'm using my finger. And it seems to me that the eraser just does a very gentle job. It doesn't damage the paper, and it came off beautifully. It really didn't do anything to the paper. I was really satisfied. It wasn't technically necessary for me to use it, but as I said, I didn't really know what I wanted to do in the background. I was expecting more coloring, so I had expected more going on in the background than just the blue. But in the end, you know, it's just kind of experimenting, and it kind of saved me the time. The blue is nice and even in the background. So, you know, I'm not really crying over that time. And I'm adding a little bit of color now to the trees. These are supposed to be birch trees, my favorite trees probably in the whole world. I really love drawing birch trees. And so I'm building the first layer of brown, basically. All the shading in this painting is a little bit of brownish. Starts with the brown, I later add a little bit of blue. But it starts with the brown, and so I'm starting to build up those layers. So I already knew that I wanted to have the underside of the mushrooms a little bit brown. I'm not exactly sure if they are poisonous mushrooms, but of course they look like that just because they're so aesthetically pleasing. And so I'm basically using just the same blue, the same blue I've mixed from the Prussian blue and other colors. And yes, I actually don't remember what I mixed to achieve that brown. But I'm adding it in layers, just the same brown in layers, and I'm adding it to the trees. It's nothing really spectacular, just trying to build up just the shape of them. And I'm also using it a little bit as a liner. So as you can see, I'm basically tracing over the branches. I wasn't sure in the beginning what I wanted to do. Initially, I thought they would be white. As I said, the background was supposed to be darker. But I really liked the brown. I really liked how the brown looked on the blue. It looked very sunny to me. It was a very, very warm, sunny picture, like the world around me. I'm very, very... I know I say a lot of those big words, but I'm really very extremely inspired by the changing world around me at the moment, especially when we go for a walk in the forest and I see the green just peeking through the branches. It's just amazing, and I wanted to capture that just a little bit. I know that mushrooms are not really the seasonal for spring, but I love mushrooms. I can't help it. It's just, there's something very magical about mushrooms, and especially giant mushrooms. Can you imagine giant mushrooms? Because that's just, for me, that's incredible. I can't even comprehend it. So mushrooms that could be bigger than my house, for example. And I'm really tempted to draw another version of this painting. I kind of treat these tiny ones more like sketches. This painting didn't take that long to paint at all. It took me much longer to actually prepare for recording rather than painting itself. But I really want to paint a bigger version to kind of go in depth into that world, because when I was painting this, I had this whole idea coming into my head of a world that's full water, just pure water, and then there are those giant mushrooms growing in it, and I was wondering how everything would work, like how the society would you know, live and prosper on these in that kind of world. But that's of course way too much thinking. So I'm, as you can see, I'm still building up the color. There's absolutely nothing spectacular here. I'm just building up the shade, kind of trying to get a more intense color. Every single time I'm promising myself to use a little bit less color. I really like the pastel, very kind of washed out colors, but for some reason when I do it in my own paintings, it doesn't fit. I need to add more intensity and build up that color, and then I'm much more satisfied. So even if I promise myself in the beginning to be very gentle with color, in the end I just add more. Now I have to admit that those two characters that I've drawn there, the boy laying inside the tent and the girl fishing, they are the two least interesting characters that I think I've ever drawn. It's they don't have their own story at all. I was more concerned with the whole setting rather than with the characters themselves. Now I wanted them to do something. I always try to incorporate some kind of action into my picture. So the girl is fishing, the boy is just, they're probably talking, laughing. The boy is just resting in the tent. But besides that, when I had to color them, I was thinking like, I don't want to. I didn't want to color them. They were just so boring. I wanted to create the world even more. Here I'm adding a bit of those like birch indents, birch markings onto the trees. They're a little bit too dense, I think. I overdid it a little bit. I should have been a little bit... They should be a little bit more sparse. But maybe they're just zebra trees. Who knows? Zebra trees are also fine. And I'm adding more lines. At this moment, I've already settled on the idea that I will add all the lines with watercolor. Because I already added the fine liner and I've added the pencil. It just needed a little bit of that watercolor to connect the paintings, like connect the lines to the painting. And it was perfect because it didn't require me to do too much. It didn't require too much work basically, but it came out beautifully. So I think from now on I will be doing it in this way, where I'll be doing lines first in the blue pencil, then kind of enhancing them with fine liner and finishing in whatever color fits, suits my fancy. Tickles my fancy. I'm still looking for some kind of way to add lines in a bit easy way. An easier way to add lines to my paintings. Now, I'm not the kind of person who plays around with ink and just nibs, just dip nibs, whatever you call it. Depends. I was considering getting a fountain pen, and I might still try it. It's a pretty cool idea. I really would like to get a brush pen. That would be ideal to do the lines. However, the brush pens that I've encountered, they are way too thick for the kind of paintings that I'm doing. As you can see, I work on small sizes most of the time, and I use very thin lines, and most of the brush pens that I bought, I couldn't find a word there for a second. Most of the brush pens, the tips are way too thick, and or even better, I have to be very careful if I want to achieve that thin line, and that requires way too much energy and it's just not worth it, all in all. So I'm still looking for a good way to add lines. If you have any ideas or you would like to suggest something, please leave me a comment below. I would love that. I absolutely love when you guys give me advice. But for now, I'm stuck with the pen, just a regular paintbrush, and watercolor. And watercolor is another problem because I often add lines, as you can see over here. I add lines during the process of painting, and it's a problem if I want to add another layer of watercolor on top, because it kind of smudges. Not really smudges, but it blurs the layer underneath, and the lines are not as crisp as I would like them to be. And that feels to me like a waste of time because I had to come in again and do the exact same thing again, so I have to do the lines again. So at this point, I've decided, well, I didn't decide, this was already the plan, but I saw this really cool video recently of Mr. Kazuo Oga. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And he is an artist behind the Studio Ghibli. He designed a lot of backgrounds for the movies, for the Ghibli movies, and I saw this technique he was using, where he was just using gouache to make those little leaves on the trees, and I loved that technique. It was just something so simple. I mean, I've used to do that a lot before, just somehow, you know, it disappeared somewhere in the years. I haven't been using it, and so I remember it and fits so perfectly with this spring inspired painting, and just adding a little bit of greenery, just poking out through the branches, just you know, growing. And I really loved it. So what I've done, because I'm not really happy with the quality of my gouache at the moment, my gouache is really low quality compared to what I've become accustomed to. It's a really weird thing to say, but I really became accustomed to good quality things. And so going back and kind of going backwards in quality really bothers me at the moment. And so what I did is that I used my white gouache and I mixed it in with the less pigmented gouache, the worse quality gouache, and that kind of added that pastel feeling to the leaves, but became more opaque and more like the pigment was there. It was more pastel. It worked in the end, so that's the most important part. And here, as you can see, I'm adding the characters at the almost very end. I wasn't interested in the characters at all. It is not a good thing because, you know, the characters are usually the most interesting part in the painting, so you're supposed to care for them. But, you know, this was just a little scene. For once, I wasn't interested in my characters at all. I was interested more in the scene itself. So, it's an experience. I suppose you can say it was just a different experience for me. And because these characters were not the main concern of the painting, I wasn't caring that much of how they looked like. So I was just experimenting a little bit with the colors. As you can see, the girl has really dark hair for once. As you know, I'm a fan of red hair. The boy, on the other hand, has blonde hair. It's something I don't use at all. I very rarely use blonde hair in my paintings. And he has a bit darker face, which lightened up in the end because I wanted it to be darker, but it turned out much lighter than I expected. And there is no shading on those characters almost at all, just basic colors, because as you can see, I immediately jump to the mushrooms and I'm adding blue lines in the shaded areas. I really like the way Prussian blue looks on top of other colors. It's a very, very beautiful blue. If you've been watching me for a while, you know I'm obsessed with blue. Blue is absolutely my favorite color. And ultramarine blue is my favorite blue, definitely. However, Prussian blue definitely comes second, and probably in a lot of uses, even outweighs the ultramarine blue because it's such a gorgeous color. And I have to say, I really fell in love with that way of lining paintings with watercolor. It adds a lot of extra dimension, I believe, to my painting. I've definitely outgrown the black outlines. I used to love the way they looked, but to be quite honest, it was mostly a matter of necessity because I didn't have a light box back in the day, and so I needed to transfer my paintings in a different way. I used a lot of very smudgy pencils and I needed to kind of get the clear sketch. I needed to actually line it, my line art, the inking, that was my basically sketch. It's just that I couldn't do it with the pencil. But nowadays, since I'm using a light box, I don't really need that anymore. And so, as you can see, my lines are evolving a lot. And I will still use lines always. I absolutely love the look of lined pictures. I don't think there will ever be a moment when I will stop using lines in my pictures, although I never say never. I mean, I never thought I would stop using black fine liner completely. So you never know. But yeah, now I'm actually adding a little bit of white, and it's just a little, not too much, because the painting itself is very bright. So I only use a lot of white if there is enough background dark colors for the white to show through. As you can see, I'm trying to add it everywhere, and I'm adding it here especially here on the water. These areas under the mushrooms were the darkest, but when I tried to add the same circles around the fishing rod line that goes into the water, I had to actually darken that area because the light circles wouldn't show. So it's always good to remember that you have to add a lot of dark for the whites to be seen. Highlights and shadows, right? And that's it, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I definitely enjoyed the painting. If you want to see it in a bigger version, please head to my Facebook page or the 52 Weeks Illustration group. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Please hit that like button, it helps me a lot. See you next time. Bye!